Conditional rendering. In React, you can create distinct components that encapsulate behavior you need. Then, you can render only some of them, depending on the state of your application. Conditional rendering in React works the same way conditions work in JavaScript. Use JavaScript operators like if or the conditional operator to create elements representing the current state, and let React update the IE to match them. You can use variables to store elements. This can help you conditionally render a part of the component while the rest of the output doesn't change. While declaring a variable and using an if statement is a fine way to conditionally render a component, sometimes you might want to use a shorter syntax. There are a few ways to inline conditions in JSX, explained below. Inline if with logical and operator. You may embed expressions in JSX by wrapping them in curly braces. This includes the JavaScript logical and operator. It can be handy for conditionally including an element. It works because in JavaScript, true and expression always evaluates to expression, and false and expression always evaluates to false. Therefore, if the condition is true, the element right after and will appear in the output. If it is false, React will ignore and skip it. Note that returning a falsy expression will still cause the element after and to be skipped but will return the falsy expression. Inline if else with conditional operator. Another method for conditionally rendering elements inline is to use the JavaScript conditional operator condition. True, false. Used like in JavaScript, it is up to you to choose an appropriate style based on what you and your team consider more readable. Also remember that whenever conditions become too complex, it might be a good time to extract a component. Preventing component from rendering. In rare cases you might want a component to hide itself even though it was rendered by another component. To do this, return null instead of its render output. Returning null from a component's render method does not affect the firing of the component's lifecycle methods. For instance, component dedupdate will still be called. Lists and keys. First, let's review how you transform lists in JavaScript. Given the code below, we use the map function to take an array of numbers and double their values. We assign the new array returned by map to the variable doubled and log it. In React, transforming arrays into lists of elements is nearly identical. Rendering multiple components. You can build collections of elements and include them in JSX using curly braces. Below, we loop through the numbers array using the JavaScript map function. We return a. When you run this code, you'll be given a warning that a key should be provided for list items. A key is a special string attribute you need to include when creating lists of elements. We'll discuss why it's important in the next section. Let's assign a key to our list items inside numbers.map and fix the missing key issue. Keys. Keys help React identify which items have changed, are added, or are removed. Keys should be given to the elements inside the array to give the elements a stable identity. The best way to pick a key is to use a string that uniquely identifies a list item among its siblings. Most often you would use IDs from your data as keys. When you don't have stable IDs for rendered items, you may use the item index as a key as a last resort. We don't recommend using indexes for keys if the order of items may change. This can negatively impact performance and may cause issues with component state. Check out Robin Picorni's article for an in-depth explanation on the negative impacts of using an index as a key. If you choose not to assign an explicit key to list items, then React will default to using indexes as keys. Extracting components with keys. Keys only make sense in the context of the surrounding array. For example, if you extract a list item component, you should keep the key on the elements in the array rather than on the. A good rule of thumb is that elements inside the map call need keys. Keys must only be unique among siblings. Keys used within arrays should be unique among their siblings. However, they don't need to be globally unique. We can use the same keys when we produce two different arrays. Keys serve as a hint to React, but they don't get passed to your components. If you need the same value in your component, pass it explicitly as a prop with a different name. JSX allows embedding any expression in curly braces so we could inline the map result. Sometimes this results in clearer code, but this style can also be abused. Like in JavaScript, it is up to you to decide whether it is worth extracting a variable for readability. Keep in mind that if the map body is too nested, it might be a good time to extract a component. Index as a key is an anti-pattern. So many times I have seen developers use the index of an item as its key when they render a list. It looks elegant and it does get rid of the warning. What is the danger here? It may break your application and display wrong data. Let me explain. A key is the only thing React uses to identify DOM elements. What happens if you push an item to the list or remove something in the middle? If the key is same as before, React assumes that the DOM element represents the same component as before. But that is no longer true. It turns out, when nothing is passed, React uses the index as key because it is the best guess at the moment. Moreover, it will warn you that it is suboptimal. If you provide it by yourself, React just thinks that you know what you are doing, which, remember the example, can lead to unpredictable results. Better. Each such item should have a permanent and unique property. Ideally, it should be assigned when the item is created. Of course, I am speaking about an id. Note, first look at the existing properties of the items. It is possible they already have something that can be used as an id. One way to do so is to just move the numbering one step up in the abstraction. Using a global index makes sure any two items would have different IDs. Much better. A production solution should use a more robust approach that would handle a distributed creation of items. For such, I recommend Monoid. It quickly generates short non-sequential URL-friendly unique IDs. The code could look like the following. Update, exception from the rule. Many people asked if they always have to generate IDs. Others have suggested use cases when using the index as a key seems justifiable. It is true that sometimes generating new IDs is redundant and may be avoided. For example, translation of license terms or list of contributors. To help you decide, I put together 3 conditions which these examples have in common. The list and items are static, they are not computed and do not change. The items in the list have no IDs. The list is never reordered or filtered. When all of them are met, you may safely use the index as a key. Update 2, React, Preact, and React. Although in this article I write about React, the problem is not exclusive to it. In similar libraries, Like React, the danger is present, too. However, the effects can be different.